The Lost Letters of Albert Pike, the origins of the Skull and Bones, an ancient artifact uncovered that dates back 8,620 years ago, and it looks like an extraterrestrial head. That's what I'm talking about. Rex Bear Leak Project, how the heck are you? Now, Scott Wolter is with us today. Scott is somewhat of a legend. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of Scott, let me give you an introduction. For those of you that have, he needs no introduction. He is the host of Travel Channel's hit TV show, America Unearthed, which follows him on his quest to uncover the truth behind historic artifacts and sites found throughout North America and around the world. Scott is also the author of several books, I think it's 10 last I checked, including the Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence, The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America, and his new book, Cryptic Code of the Templars in America, Origins of the Hooked X. Scott has been president of American Petrographic Services Incorporated since 1990. He has been the principal petrographer in more than 10,000 investigations throughout the world. And so today, I want to get his take on this 9,000 or almost 9,000-year-old artifact. I'm going to show it to you real quick, and then we're going to dive deep into the subject. So this is the artifact that is on his website, scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com, nanu. And you can see right here, this artifact of an elongated head that looks like an alien's is covered with scenes that include spaceships, planets, designs, and numerous inlays of stone. This glue used in the artifact was C14 tested, and the result was 8,620 years before present. And before we dive any deeper into that, I want to thank my friends over at Noble Gold Investments. Colin Plume was on the show yesterday. He is so knowledgeable about the markets. Now, if you've got a 401 or an IRA, you want to give them a call. Not only do they give free books to Leak Project listeners, how to get out of the rat race. It's a quick read. Also, how inflation is used to keep you in the rat race, how Big Brother lies to keep you in there as well. But if you're kind of on the fence, now could be probably the best time to convert, to move your 401 or IRA. Check this out. So this is a United States mint coin. This is a commemorative coin from 2019, the Apollo 11 50th anniversary. These are going for over $300 right now. They have never even been touched by human hands, as you can see. Well, for any qualified 401 or IRA that converts into precious metals as well as even cryptos, you can move into cryptos, you can move into all of the above, and you can always move back to stocks. It's all about diversifying. You will get this as a token to remind you what you're going to be holding on to. So after the podcast, click the links in the video description box. Get the free books, give Colin and Noble Gold a call, let them know I sent you to get that free commemorative coin, and enjoy this presentation. I am stoked. He is going to bring so much information, and he's also, when I'm referring to Scott now, when Scott talks about his beliefs and his passions, Scott is a Freemason, and he brings a very optimistic approach to Freemasonry. I've talked about this before. I've got friends and family that are Freemasons. I am not a Freemason. I am a conspiracy scientist that lives in the garage, not down by the river. But I think it's good to get a perspective from somebody that's actually a Freemason, not somebody that's just on the outside looking in when we talk about these subjects, because he's uncovered so many different cryptic messages, and he is so knowledgeable with this art. I think that we're really honored and lucky to have this opportunity. So let's bring in Scott right now. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. If you want to take advantage of this, which you probably do, you have to do it by the end of the month. So the sooner you call them, the better. Noble Gold Investments. Hello. Scott, it is an honor to speak with you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here at Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm doing really good. I just got off the basketball court. I had a great workout, and now I'm ready to talk.
That's what I'm talking about. Get the blood rushing, the endorphins rolling. I just watched one of your presentations on YouTube, and it was a fascinating discussion. You even had the whiteboard out, or actually not a whiteboard, but you had a screen behind you, and you were showing different slides, Cryptic Code of the Templars in America. And right. I think this was on Lex Media, and I like your optimism. I got to say, I think it's fascinating how you research these different societies and these cryptic messages, and you said, hey, I want to be a Mason. And there's a lot of mystery behind the Freemasons, and there's a lot of internet talk. And I think it's, you read stuff on the internet, and of course, everything's real on the internet. I mean, if somebody wrote it on the internet, it must be true.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah, totally. And so I want to get into that. Like, why did you decide that you wanted to be a Mason? And what is it to you to be a Mason?
Well, I'm trying to think of when it really started for me the day after my dad's death. And I don't want to dwell on the story because it's a sad story, but he drowned while we were scuba diving together over in Australia back when I was in my early 20s. And it was the worst experience I'll ever have. And that's a whole nother thing. He drowned and it was awful. But what happened was the day after he passed, they cut this ring off his finger that he always wore. Of course, as a kid, I never looked at it. I didn't care, right? And for the first time ever, I looked at this thing and it was really worn. And I saw this curved sword that had a 5-pointed star in that curved open area. And I had no idea what I was looking at. So I went home and eventually at some point I had this ring in my pocket and I said, "Mom, what's this?" And she said, "Oh, that's your dad's Shriner's ring." And I went, "What's a Shriner?" "Oh, he was a Freemason." "What's a Freemason?" And, she said, "Oh, well, that's a group that he belongs to." And I don't really even remember what she said, but it was out of my mind as quickly as it was in. But I always remembered that ring. And so years went by and, I started my business and in the year 2000, the Kensington Runestone came into our lab and, we did the science, the weathering was old, therefore it must be genuine. I was criticized and attacked. I didn't understand. Now I understand what the problem is, but it ultimately led me to try to figure out the follow-up questions to the authenticity of the stone. And those are basically, somebody carved it, right? They came from some place for some reason. So I started to delve into that research, which led me to Sweden, to the Cistercians, and to these military knights that carried the swords called the Templars. And it was an evidence trail that went directly to them and nobody else. And that's when I started to research the Knights Templar. Well, it didn't take long before it evolved into Freemasonry. And so I started to study Freemasonry. And then I decided I was going to reach out to the local Masons. And what was interesting that I didn't realize for a little while was that when I started talking about the Kensington Runestone and making these connections to the Templars and to the Freemasons, there was one particular brother who's now a very good friend. His name is Mark Campbell, who would show up at my lectures on the Runestone. This was over 10 years before I became a Mason. And I started to notice him sitting in the back. And one day I went up to him before the lecture started, and he just smiled at me, and I said, "You're a Freemason, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And I go, "How am I doing?" He said, "Pretty good." He said, "Just keep doing what you're doing." Well, this intrigued me, and eventually this led to an invitation to come down to the Scottish Rite Temple. And they had a library there that they welcomed, me into. Well, they had already been checking me out, so they knew that I was serious, right? And so I started to go there quite frequently. And they could not have been more helpful and supportive of the research. And of course, I had a lot of questions, and they answered all of those questions. And really what I was doing was I was researching Freemasonry. And the more I learned, the more I liked what I saw. And, I think you've watched the show enough. I think you have a sense of me. I'm not really a joiner. I've never really been a joiner. I've played a lot of sports, so I'm a good teammate, I like to think. But it's different to join organizations. And because of the research, because of the history that was unfolding, because of the way these guys were, and I started to understand and appreciate the philosophy behind what they're all about. And the number one word that always crept into my head that I think describes my brother Masons, I'll call them now, is tolerance. and, not judging people, being open and supportive and always dwelling on the positives. And now I know why that is. And I understand we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religions when we're in lodge or we meet together. And the reason is because those are things that divide us, not unite us. Well, in any case, for a long time when I was doing the show, they actually said, well, if you ever want to become a Mason, just let us know. And I really was curious and I wanted to do it, but I held off because I said to myself, I don't want people to find out I'm a Mason and think that I'm biased and not objective, because, that's what I do for a living. And I have to be objective and let the evidence and the science and the facts drive the investigation, right? Well, eventually I got to a point where I said, hey, the people that support me, do they care if I'm a Freemason? No, they don't. And the people that don't support me, do I care if they support me or not? Hell no. So I said, screw it, let's do it. And I knocked on the door. And that was, I was raised as a Master Mason in November of 2015. So my 5-year anniversary is coming up. And I have to say, Rex, it's been an amazing journey.
That's really cool how you did the research first. And I like your mindset there. And it sounds like something made you decide to do it and to join. And it's been a great benefit for you and a wonderful opportunity. But why do you think there's so much crap on the internet about Freemasons and Masons being evil?
That's easy. It's easy. And I want to say this, and I don't want to say this. This is me stepping away from the craft a little bit. Obviously, I'm biased towards the craft because I'm involved in it, but I really can be objective because I wouldn't have joined, unless I felt like it was something that I should do. Now, is Freemasonry perfect? Of course not. However, all these positive things that I told you about briefly are definitely what its fundamental makeup is. And the idea that when we take an obligation, you can take your obligation on a Bible, the Torah, the Quran, on Native brothers take it on an eagle feather. The point is this: you have to make an expression about a belief in a higher power. Part of the reason for that, the philosophy behind that, is if you have a person who doesn't believe in something that is greater than them, their ego gets out of control. And when that happens, and I'm not trying to get political here, I'm just talking about the human condition, okay? When a person does not have any personal accountability or humility, or the ability to say that there's something out there that's greater than me, I think that person is going to not realize their full potential. So you have to make an expression about a higher power. Who that power is, what you call it, we don't care. That's not our business. That's your business. And so when we meet in lodge, this is what we mean by meeting on the square, right? You can have a Native brother, you can have somebody who's Jewish, somebody who's a Buddhist, someone who's a Muslim. We don't care, because that deity that we're all talking about is the same thing at the end of the day. So therefore, we're all equal. And you've got the Prince Hall, which is African American lodges that white brothers can be members of as well. It's all about equality, because at the end of the day, the way I like to say it is we all eat, sleep, heart, we all do the same things, right? When we cut ourselves, what color is our blood? It's all red. So that's the fundamental tenet. Now, why is it such a secret thing? Why is it that people are come up with all this crazy stuff? Well, when you're not part of something, you don't understand something, you're always going to look for the negatives, right? I mean, that's just part of the human condition. The reality is there are certain entities, like, for example, and this isn't an attack on the Roman Catholic Church, but the Roman Catholic Church does not like us. And the reason is because we don't tell people what to believe, what to think, what to do. That's up to you. And again, you can be whatever religion you want. Now, the other thing I think that I find strange about this question that you just asked, there's all this negative things about Freemasonry. Here's a fact that I know you don't know. I guarantee you probably 99% of your audience doesn't know. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, do you know how many of them were Master Masons?
53?
Yeah.
Hello.
Stop it. Where did you get that? I want to know.
I've been researching stuff like this for 20 years. And
seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
53 of the 56.
Boom. Hello.
That's not bad, baby. But think about this. Here's the other thing that to me makes it a little bit crazy. Pretty much all of our founding fathers, right? We're all Freemasons. The Declaration, everything in our Constitution, that is a Masonic document. Whether people realize it or not, it is. Here's a fact check for people.
Great point. Masonic document. Now, a lot of people know that the nation was founded upon Freemasonry, but the way that you describe the Constitution being a Masonic document, that's an interesting connection that I think a lot of people overlook, and it's a great point.
Well, it's a fact. And here's a couple of things that need to be clarified, because right now in the discussion, this is all screwed up, okay? Fact number one, this is not a Christian nation, okay? People think that it is. Most people in this country happen to be Christians. We are not a Christian nation, okay? And that's very clear in the Constitution, but it gets muddled, and, a large percentage of the people in this country think that it is. That's wrong. Okay. Secondly, we fought our revolution against who?
The English.
And why did we fight against them?
Freedom and oppression.
Well, freedom from persecution, from oppression, from a monarchy, from one person at the top, right? We fought a revolution over that. But yet now we seem to be drifting towards a monarchy. I mean, towards essentially a dictator. Again, this isn't a political statement. This is a fact. Now, I can guarantee you the current occupant has no idea about Freemasonry and about these tenets upon which this nation was founded. And unfortunately, in our schools, this is not being taught. Everybody learned about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, all the rest of them, right? These great men who have been lionized to the point of near godlike status. But what you never hear is they were all Freemasons. And if you do, what does that mean? Nobody teaches. They certainly don't teach that in school. And the question is, why not?
I would say that if you look at the media, and this is a fact, 5 corporations now control over 90% of the media. It used to be 6 corporations, but Walt Disney purchased Fox. So now Fox is a part of that.
Right.
And so you take that and you combine the majority of the materials that are taught in school. There's 5 or 6 corporations that control the majority of the materials that are taught in school, and they have a certain agenda. And I think that a lot of this knowledge is powerful, and they don't want people to know about it. They want you to follow the—
Absolutely.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. And it's, and this was one of the reasons why I felt it was important to become a Mason, to truly understand it from the inside out, so that when I'm talking about it, whether it's on television, in a Zoom call like this, or just when I give my lectures, I want people to know what the facts are. And, you can decide for yourself if it's something for you or not, but you can't make a decision about anything until you understand and have information to be able to consider, right? And so I feel that's part of what I'm doing. People can say, "Oh, you're a Mason, you're biased." Well, yes, I am. But the reason is I was convinced by the evidence that this was a good thing, that it's something that, and beyond that, not only was my father a Mason, my grandfather was a Mason, my great-grandfather was a Mason. I guarantee it keeps going back in the old country. And I'm hoping someday that my son will become a Mason as well, because, you know, it's like anything else. When you join an organization, or you're part of an organization, if you see somebody who's part of your organization, whether it's the Lions Club or Rotary, or you work for the same company, right? You have something in common right away. When it comes to Freemasonry, you know, when you meet another brother on the street, you guys have been through a lot of the same profound, deeply impactful experiences that as a Freemason, when you go through your first 3 degrees, I'm telling you, man, you will never forget it. And everybody in that room that is part of that degree, whether they're performing it or watching it, they're supporting you. They know what's going to happen. And they can't wait to see your reaction. And they can't wait to talk to you about it afterwards, right? And so you've got this bond. And it's like, if I meet you and I know you're a Mason, brother, you know what I'm talking about right away. So we're already up here. Whereas if you meet somebody else, you're down here, you got to work your way up. We're already here. And it's just, and you take obligations that says you're going to conduct yourself a certain way in society, and you're also going to conduct yourself that way and beyond for Brother Mason and his family. So there's things that we have in common that just, and then, if let's say you're a third party and you're watching these 2 guys that just meet and they're getting along and they're taking off and you're like kind of left behind a little bit because you can't talk about that stuff because you don't know what they're talking about. I can see where people would be turned off by that because they just don't get it. And we're not trying to be rude. It's just, we already know each other at a certain level beyond another stranger.
Yeah. It's like if you talk to a veteran and they meet another veteran.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Great example. That's a great example. Look, you've been through basic training. You've been told this is how you conduct yourself. You've lived it. You put your life on the line. And, and that is why after World War II, there was a huge influx of new Masons from the veterans because, they miss their brothers, right? I mean, if you're a veteran and you've gone to war and somebody else has gone, you're higher than a Mason, right? We're down here compared to you guys. So it's a great analogy. It's the same thing. And a very high percentage of veterans, people in law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, a very high percentage of them happen to also be Masons.
Maybe that's what concerns some people is the not knowing as well as the indoctrination and the stuff that they have read. And just as with it, you look at the human race, there's great people and there's people that aren't so much. And so, they could be saying, well, they're a Freemason or they're a part of this organization. So then all of them are bad. That's what some people get the assumption, which is so bizarre because if you look at just as the Christian religion, and I'm not Christian, I'm agnostic. I was raised Christian, but when I say agnostic, I just mean, I don't know. Do I believe in a divine providence? Absolutely. I can't explain it. I mean, it's way beyond my faith.
I'm with you 100%.
So, yeah. But so a lot of times, people will have an ego and they'll think because of their beliefs that they're superior. And I think that it's fascinating to kind of have an even playing field. But then you might have somebody outside of that circle where they're like, well, wait a second, look at them. They're all a part of this even playing field and I'm not in the playing field. So it kind of concerns. So I can see both sides. Absolutely. I'm not a Freemason. I mean, I'm a conspiracy scientist in my garage here, doing research just like you. And so I got to ask you, man, so you invented this technology. What's this technology you invented?
Archaeopetrography.
What is that?
Say it 3 times fast.
I tried. I did 10 takes before this and I couldn't say it right. So I just left it out of the
Well, the work that we do, petrography is basically the forensic microscopic investigation of inorganic materials, right? Like rock, cement, concrete, all this stuff that doesn't contain organic carbon. Archaeopetrography is just applying those laboratory techniques, that science to various aspects of archaeology. So it's archaeopetrography. And, I have to say, this sort of developed organically. It started with the runestone, and then we applied it to other places. Then people started sending stuff in. And I don't want to make the claim that we're the end all, that we have all the answers to every question. There are many times I come back and I do my analysis. I say, I don't know. But there are many times we come back and we can really add a lot of new information, new knowledge. And sometimes we can answer the question, like we did in the case of the Kensington runestone, by applying these laboratory techniques. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have been able to provide definitive answers in the case of the runestone, the Spirit Pond runestones, the Bat Creek stone, the Tucson lead artifacts, and we have also debunked certain artifacts. And I want to be careful the way I say this, but one of those was the Burroughs Cave mystery, right? Uh-oh. Are you still there?
I'm here. Yeah, I was showed that you said you debunked something, so I just wanted to show off your website.
Right.
Where you debunked these two.
Right.
It says UFO. You're like, oh, dude, it's 5,000 years old. It says UFO on it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, that one was here's the thing. When we went into that cave, if you go to the picture just above it, that is where those artifacts were found. And we went in there with these guys and I said, okay, where did you pull these out of? And they, right here in this little alcove here and the whole thing. So what I did was I collected some of the sediment, right? Now go back to the artifacts. Now, do you see that brownish, sort of reddish brownish color, that dirt in the grooves?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't even have to put it under the microscope. I could just look at the two samples that I collected in the cave, and I looked at this dirt and I said, all I can tell you is this did not come from there. This material is completely different than that gray brown stuff or the gray, dark gray stuff that was in the cave. This is a reddish brown clay. They're completely different. So you say this came from here, this doesn't match. And they were buried, right? So that was a problem. And then, there was evidence of using a Dremel tool we found on the artifact on the left, which kind of looks like a big phallic to me, but
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
that's what everybody's thinking.
Stuff right there, man.
Yeah. But anyway, there was just all this evidence that was going the wrong way. And then, when we were filming this, I went to the field producer. His name was Pat. And I said, Pat, look at this. I said, see this UFO? And I said, can I say, should I say something? I felt like it would be insulting. And the one thing that we don't want to do is we're not there to insult anybody or embarrass anybody. We're just trying to get to the truth, right? And so I wanted to check with him to make sure that it was okay for me to point that out. He said, yeah, go for it. And you know what? The guys, they took it in stride. They took it really in real life. I mean, not just the way it was portrayed on television. They said, hey, we believe you. And if you say that that's a problem. And then when I showed it to them, they laughed, they said, oh my God. So I don't think these guys perpetrated this. I think they found somebody else's practical joke.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That is so funny. UFO. You just gotta laugh at that. That is classic.
Once you see it, you can't not see it, right?
Right. Now was this the one that was
yes.
Legit?
Yep. Yeah. Hey, now scroll down to okay, you see no, go back to that artifact. The one we were just looking at. Okay, yeah. Get the eye and the mouth in there. Okay. So what they did was they scraped around the mouth because there was a glue that was used to glue those pieces in there. Obviously, that's not the same rock as the overall piece, right? And then they got a test result. And then I don't remember if we even talked about the first test, but the test that I did was the second test. And what I did is I took a sample from around the eye. And I scraped that glue in there, and that's what we ran the C14 on. But the glue around the mouth was already tested. Yes, exactly. So that was the second date, and they were very close. It was 86 and like 83 something. So those were very good tests, and one confirming the other. Now, when you look at that, the first thing you go is, boom, mind blown, right? And my mind was blown.
But they could be using old glue.
Well, they could be using an old glue, or the other thing, and we have not tested this yet, but the other thing it could be is, let's say you took some mammoth bone, right? Mammoth bone from the Pleistocene period that could be 6 to 20,000 years old, anywhere in that range, or even older. And you mix it with a modern adhesive or with an old adhesive. What kind of dates would you get? In other words, can you falsify those test results, or can you come up with a modern explanation? And the answer to that question is we don't know. So as exciting and interesting as it is, we still have to do some more work before we can start to say, hey, look, these things might actually be thousands of years old. I'm not ready to go there yet. That's definitely still on the table, but we have to be able to convince ourselves that it can't be, reproduced with modern materials.
Right. And you bring up, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm looking at it and certain aspects of it look modern to me. Like,
right.
The one thing that is interesting is on the arm, I have seen almost identical petroglyphs. Now I'm having a difficult time saying petroglyph. And I studied, my mind's messed up here. So petroglyphs, I study them. There's a ton of them out here in the Four Corners region. And we've been decoding these petroglyphs with possible solar events that the natives saw. But this one right here, I have seen even at, I think, Newspaper Rock in Utah, a very popular location. That is at Newspaper Rock. So that's interesting.
Yeah, well, a lot of these symbols that you see, even though they look like something that's familiar, they're often thousands of years old. That particular one with the 3 steps going up and down, that's ancient. So, and it's being used in modern times today. So
that's cool. Now,
what's old is new. That's the back of that artifact.
Okay. And then I wanted to show off this one.
Oh, that one's downstairs.
Wow.
That's cool, isn't it?
That is cool.
I've tested that one too. And I got over 10,000 years with that one.
Oh, geez. Now,
86. No, it was 8620. That's right. That one was 86. That's right. I thought it was just over 10, but 8, 10, it's pretty close.
Yeah, we're right there. Absolutely. I remember I used this as I want to use this as the thumbnail, part of the thumbnail, because this reminds me of the elongated skulls almost.
Right.
The eyes are different.
Yeah.
That's like wow. That's incredible.
The almond-shaped eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We have a contractor working on the roof outside.
And so, all right, we got that out of the way. The dog got excited. You've got some people working on the roof.
Sorry about that.
That's a nice dog. It sounds like, that's what they're for,
Well, yeah, he makes his presence felt. That's for sure.
Right on. So should we take this to the letters now? To the lost letters?
Well, yeah, I think you mean Albert Pike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. So before we do that, though, I think we need a little bit of a context summary to get people sort of up to speed, to understand the context of this letter. Now, we are going to be launching something in the near future, and that's all I'm going to say, that is going to delve very deeply into long lost but recently discovered Templar documents that tell the most amazing story about the real founding of the history of this nation. And basically the story is that the Templars in the 12th century captured the Holy Land, used it as a base of operations, collected a bunch of stuff in the region, including Egypt. And then after about 80 years, history says they were defeated by the Muslims, but they weren't defeated. They were done, and they gave it up, and they left. Then they brought those treasures over here to North America, where they were stored for hundreds of years and eventually were used during the time of the Revolution to fund the founding of the nation. That obligation started with the Templars and was passed on to the craft, to Freemasonry. All of our founding fathers were Freemasons. All the founding fathers knew about this. They just didn't tell anyone. Now, not only were all of our founding fathers Freemasons, they were also Knights Templar. Again, they just didn't tell anyone. So these documents that we have tell this story in detail. Some of the documents that we are going to be releasing begin in the 14th century, when a young man at 8 years old, 8 is a sacred number, of course. It's the number one number to the Templars. Actually, 13 is, but 8's right there. Was given a journal when he was 8 years old and told to write down things throughout his life that he would want to remember when he's a man. That's what his father said. So he starts writing in this journal. That young man grew up to be Earl Henry Sinclair. He was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar in his time in Scotland. And he started this tradition that was a father-to-son tradition. The obligation was you were to travel to the Western lands once with your father and once with your son. And he brought one of the rounds of treasures, not the only round, and they buried him in 8 places. Ironically, none of those places was Oak Island. Oak Island is a decoy site that is working beautifully to this day. And anyway, more treasures were brought over at different times, but this obligation was passed on to his son, to his son, to his son, and to his son. At the 5th generation down, there was some problems within the clan, and the journals were passed from one family, the Sinclair family, to another family. And then it went for 10 more generations. And then ultimately in the 1770, a 28-year-old guy led 46 Freemasons under the orders of Benjamin Franklin to go get those treasures. And he did. Now, the story I just told you, which is an abbreviated version of those documents, which the world has not seen yet, we pitched that show, a show about that story, to the networks. And History Channel, it's supposed to be, you know, under the rose, as we like to say, confidential. Well, they've already started on the Curse of Oak Island, floating out the idea that there might not be a treasure there. And our founding fathers recovered the treasures to fund the revolution. Gee, where'd they get that? We pitched that 2.5 years ago. They want this story because they have over 3 million people watching a show that isn't real. And we're not going to give it to them because I don't trust them. I'm not giving it to them, period. But anyway, when you hear that graceful exit out of that show, now you know where they got it.
That's huge. And man, I bet that crushed the hearts of the people that have spent millions out there trying to uncover that treasure.
Well, it doesn't crush me. I can care less.
Oh yeah. Hello. No,
why do I care?
No,
I told him
so
this. I told him this years ago.
they leaked out what
on the island. Pardon?
they leaked out what you said.
Well, because it's to their benefit.
Wow.
You know how much money is involved in that show?
Oh, I'm
Lots.
sure it's big bucks. Absolutely.
They don't care about me. I'm a small timer compared to them. But anyway, this is, you know, if it sounds a little like sour grapes, it is. The reason our show isn't on right now is they don't want anything to compete with that show.
You know, there's
even a second.
If you type in your show, like the name of your show, one of the first things that comes up under Google search is why was it canceled? Because everybody loved it. And then you came out on Travel Channel again last year, and so
it was never canceled. It was never.
Wow.
No, what happened was we did 3 seasons on H2, and our ratings went like this. We passed Ancient Aliens as the #1 show. And we were getting, you know, we'd finished season 3. We were getting ready for season 4. And they sold H2. They sold it. And so I remember my agent said to me, well, I don't know who doesn't renew their #1 show. They're going to move you over to Big History. And then I did a little work on another series called Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar. And then after that, it was about May and about when we would typically start. And they said, they're not renewing the show. And I said, why not? And you know what they said? They said, the reason is, they said, your show's too smart for history. God.
Well, you got to watch the commercials. That makes sense, actually. For a minute, I was questioning that. But if you watch the commercials, it totally makes sense.
Well, if you watch a lot of the shows, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Oh man.
And you know, that's okay. So again, we were never canceled. And what happened is one of the network execs over at Discovery said, hey, I've always wanted to get that show back. That's a great show. We were off for 3 years and then we got another season. But then the reason, when we didn't get canceled again either, technically our show's still alive. But what happened was Travel Channel, where they put us, which I thought was kind of a dumb idea, it's 100% paranormal now. So our show is not a good fit for that. I'm not a paranormal guy. I'm not saying there isn't anything to it. I have no idea. It's just not my thing. So we could theoretically come back. I mean, I'm not holding my breath, but technically we've never been canceled.
Well, now you can start your own channel, do your own shows, and then you don't have to sit in the car while you're waiting for the script. You write the script. Yeah.
Bingo. That's why, you know, I mean, if I was pandering to the networks, I wouldn't have told you what I just told you.
Yeah, I kind of picked up on that.
Well, look, I'm tired of giving them our content, and they pay me to host the show, and that's it. The production company makes a huge amount of money, and the networks make a ton of money, and it's our content. So I'm done with that.
Have you heard the connection between Jesse James and the Knights Templar?
Yes.
I had a guest on that's related to Jesse James. And
Dan Duke.
What's that?
Dan Duke?
I think it was – okay, let me look this up. He recently wrote a book.
Yeah, that's him.
That name sounds super familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him. Daniel Duke.
And his sister does shows with him sometimes, I think. Let me pull it up here. If this is
right here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Oh,
what do you
yeah.
think about that? You think there's some kind of questioning the status? Do you think that he was related to the Templar, or that he had connections with the Templar?
Well, yeah, because Albert Pike was connected to the Templars too. And so this is getting kind of into the conversation that we're about to have about Albert Pike. Do I think there's a connection between the Templars and the Knights of the Golden Circle and all that? Absolutely. No question about it. I think, you know, this is just one tentacle of a huge octopus of connections that have sort of sprouted after the Templars morphed into Freemasonry. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. And I'll just tell you. Most of what you read about the Templars is garbage. right? Ooh, they were founded to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. That's such garbage. It's stupid. No. The Templars, the leadership of the Templars had a completely different ideology than everybody thought. They thought they were the fighting force of the Roman Catholic Church. Technically, on paper, they were, but the leadership embraced a completely different ideology. They venerated the feminine aspect of the Godhead, the goddess, okay? And you don't even have to be initiated into Freemasonry or any other order. There's all kinds of other stuff out there. And I'm involved in that other stuff. So I really understand how this works. And so the Templars had a different ideology than everybody thinks. And this is part of the reason the Roman Catholic Church put them down. It wasn't just over money, it was over ideology. And they completely duped the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church stole all of their symbolism and their everything they have is borrowed from something that's older, right? I mean, have you ever seen Queen Isis with her son Horus? It's
Yes.
the same imagery of Mother Mary and child, right? So, and when you look at what, if you're in a Catholic service, they talk about the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Okay. And I do this in my lectures. I ask people, I go, what's the Holy Spirit? And they go, oh, well, it's the Spirit in you. They don't even know what it is, right? And I say to people, look, here's what I think it is. You got the Father, you got the child. Who's missing? Mama, right? I mean, hello? So the Holy Spirit, is that the feminine? Of course it is, right? And what is the symbol of the sacred feminine in Christian iconography? A dove, right?
I was thinking Mother Mary, but dove, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. But the dove, right, is the Holy Spirit, right? And the Holy Spirit is above everything, right? Well, guess what? That's the sacred feminine, right? Because without her, why is she elevated? Because women are the life givers. Hello? Hate to break it to you. They give life, right? And when you go back in ancient times, people may or may not have understood how that process worked. What they did understand, and most importantly, appreciate, is that life came from the female. And what happened with the church, right? It got flipped on its head. Now, the Templars, their genesis came from a group of families that basically gave up their firstborns, right? They were part of a sacred bloodline that is ancient and that was kept track of, that goes all the way back to Israel, Egypt, and beyond, okay? These people have been keeping track of this stuff for a long freaking time, and they're still around, okay? And they embrace that ancient ideology. The problem is world events and all these different factions and ideologies clash. So what did they do? They went underground. And everything was veiled, right? And within symbolism. And if you're not initiated and you aren't given the keys with the eyes to see, you're not going to get it, right? But if you and I are on the same squad, we get it. Everybody else doesn't, because we know what to look for. We understand what that symbol means. So there's a whole language that has been passed on that's strictly through symbols, through these families, through the millennia. But in the 12th century, they mobilized. And this is what they did, because their ultimate goal was to establish the third temple, right? The sanctuary where their families could live and embrace the ideology that they always wanted to embrace, this veneration of the sacred feminine. Now, Did you know that Native Americans are matriarchal?
I did not.
Most people don't know that. And the reason that I know some of this stuff is because I used logic back when I was looking at the runestone. And the logic was this: if there were people that came from Europe, obviously carving a Scandinavian runestone, right? And they came all the way over here. There's no way in hell in the middle of the 14th century, before Chris discovered America, which is the most stupidest thing that was ever said anywhere. Do you think they fought their way to Kensington, Minnesota? No. They traveled with the natives. They wouldn't have got anywhere near this place without them. So how did that happen? How did this relationship develop? It had everything to do with ideology. Because people had been coming over here for a long, long, long time. And they had the same ideology. Natives have their own secret society. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised.
It's the same thing as Freemasonry. It's the same thing. Everything's the same. The lodges are the same dimensions. The rituals are the same. They follow the sun just like we do. It's the same. So when they came over here, they became brothers, blood brothers. And when those treasures are brought over, gold doesn't mean anything to the indigenous people. They don't care about it. But they said, you are our brothers. This is important to you. If you want us to guard them, we will. And they did. And when they came back, 387, whatever years later it was, they were waiting for him. They said, hey, they're right here. We've been protecting them the whole time. And look how we repaid those people. Think about that.
Look at how those that blame it on us, though. I mean, it wasn't us. That's one thing that bothers me when people are like, the white man's evil and the white man did this. And I'm like, well, you know what? My family's white and they didn't do that kind of stuff. They were loving, they were loving, caring people that cared very deeply for the natives. Kind of like you're talking about. There were certain parts that were white that came out here was super awesome. There's people that are white, just like everybody else.
It's an oversimplification, right?
It is, yeah.
To communicate a message, you have to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator. But the point is that secret society within the indigenous people still exists, still there. And both my wife and I have been very fortunate to have been accepted by certain members of that society. I've actually participated in their sweats. And the reason was I was doing research. But I had to earn the right to ask my questions. And that whole ritual was just incredible. And finally, when the time came and they said, okay, Scott, ask your questions. And I said, well, I want to ask you about the Knights Templar. And he stopped me and he goes, oh, you mean our blood brothers? And that's all I needed to hear after that. I knew at that moment that I was right about all this and that it was logic. If these guys came here, who do you think they ran into? I mean, hello. And so it just took off from there. But And here's the other thing. I guess I'll just take it right to the stone, and then we'll get to Brother Pike. The other thing that would never have happened if I didn't become a Freemason was I went through a ritual, one of the higher degrees in the York Rite, and it has to do with the Ark of the Covenant and the 9 arches and all that. You can read it online. I'm not giving away any secrets, but at one point in the lecture, and just so you understand, our rituals are made up of part theatrical performance and then part lecture. So what'll happen is you'll watch a play basically, and they're really good. And then afterwards, one of the white hats, one of the 33rds will get up and he'll give a lecture that sort of helps you to understand what it is you just watched. What were you supposed to learn from that, right? And I remember he said, and the other 8 arches were built by 22 men from Gebel. And I went, 8 and 22, those are the first two numbers on the Kensington runestone. 8 Goths and 22 Northmen. And I didn't hear another thing after that. Now think about this. Who else is going to recognize those numbers that knows the inscription better than me? Nobody. And all of a sudden, I went over to one of my Masonic mentors, John Freeberg. I said, John, is there a ritual book to this degree? He said, yes. I go, give me that. And I started going through it. And the rest of the numbers were all there in the degree in sequence. Are you kidding me? Forget about it. And it was how many numbers? Of course, 8. And it began with 8. And it was just, and there's no way mathematically that that's a coincidence. Forget it. Forget it. So what does that mean? Well, I started to delve into the research behind that degree. And that degree has to do with the Templars, the Enochian mysteries, the 9 arches, the secret vault, the whole thing. And without having the eyes to see, I never would have caught it. I all of a sudden, everything in that inscription made sense to me. And what it also meant to me is that the entire inscription is not to be taken, well, check that. Most of the inscription is not to be taken literally. It's allegorical, right? There are no 10 dead men. Sorry to break it to you. It's 10 men red from blood and death. 10 is a very important number in Freemasonry. But here, I'll give you one of them, okay? What's 8 plus 22?
30.
Plus 2 shelters.
32, 32nd degree?
1 day's journey north.
33rd. 33.
Coincidence?
I like that. So that's how you could be talking to somebody in code and nobody would even know except for the 2 people talking.
100%. You got it. You got it. And it just goes on from there. Now, that particular Enochian mystery goes all the way back to Egypt and the whole story of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the sun. And I'll just tell you what it is briefly. The basic story is that Osiris takes a trip to go visit who he didn't realize was his jealous brother Set, who hated him, right? So he goes there unknowingly, walks into an ambush, and he's killed. His body is cut up into 14 pieces. 14 days journey from this island, year 1362. That's the last thing in the inscription. His body is cut up into 14 pieces. They're placed along the banks of the Nile River for the crocodiles to eat. Isis, his lover, becomes distraught and worried he's missing, so she goes looking for her lover. She finds 13 pieces, the feminine, everything except his phallic, his penis, like that artifact we saw. And so she crafts, depending on which mystery you read, so she crafts one either out of beeswax or gold. She impregnates herself. Horus is born. He grows up to be Osiris, and the whole story starts over again. And all it is an allegorical story about birth in the spring, death in the fall, resurrection on the winter solstice. It's all about the annual cycle of life on the planet, told in an allegorical story. Every culture on the planet has the same freaking story, and it uses the same numbers. It's universal, but it's not taught in school. It's taught in the mystery schools. So this is what this is all about. And once I realized that that's what the inscription was really all about, and I'm not saying this because I'm bragging, I'm saying this because it's a fact. I'm the first person to see that on the Kensington runestone. That was the missing piece that tells me that this is not a modern artifact, you donkeys. This was carved by an initiated monk in the 14th century. And let me tell you something, the Templars were initiated, the Cistercians were initiated, and that the story that was vitally important to the essence of their belief system. And if you don't understand that, you are never going to figure it out. That's why all of these scholars who claim, oh, well, this is modern and, this wasn't used in the 14th. How the hell do you know if it was used in the 14th century, right? Do we have all the documents? No, we don't, because when I went over there, I found stuff that they didn't know about, right? That's a whole nother story. But my point is this. This is vitally important, okay? Remember I talked about what it took before you can have the eyes to see, before you can truly be initiated with new knowledge that you don't even know exists. You have to be humble. You have to be mentally ready to receive and admit that you don't know it all. And until that happens, you can't be initiated. It's not possible. That is why you have to make an expression about a belief in a higher power, because that proves that you admit that there's something greater than you. It's about becoming humble. One of the things that doesn't happen in all lodges, but I have experienced, and I'll just tell you what it is. It goes back to strict observance. It's called the Chamber of Reflection. And what they do is they take you, and this doesn't happen in every lodge. I've been very fortunate to go through this. You get put in a small room. You sit in a chair, and there's a table in front of you. And all there is a candle, a Bible that's open to a particular verse, which I'm not going to tell you, a cross with Jesus on it, and a skull. And that's it. And you sit in there for a period of time. And the whole point is to remind you of one thing, that skull, right? That's you. At some point, that's you. Every single one of us on this planet came into this world with nothing, and we're going to go out with nothing. It's what happens in between and the people that you impact that really is what life is all about, right? Nobody gives a shit how much money you had when you're laying there in your coffin or the urn with your ashes are in it. So that's what this process is about. It's about realizing there's something greater than you. And so by being humbled in that process, and then you go to through these amazing degrees, you're ready to receive. These scholars that have been trying to tell us what the runestone isn't, they're never going to get it. And I wasn't ready to get it until I was in my 50s, because I knew it all too. When I was a young man, I knew it all. And it wasn't until I became an older man that I realized till I was ready. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but that's really the essence of this whole experience. It starts and ends with that skull. And if that doesn't get to you, you're never going to get there. And don't worry about it. Just go on and do something else.
Well, I saw you wear the skull and bones recently, you had a little pin, and you were describing, I think, the origins of the skull and bones. And most people, they think of skull and bones and they think of 322, that mystery school from Yale, where that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So I'm interested to hear about the skull. And I think of pirate ships too. So pirate ships are cool.
Well, the pirates, a lot of those pirates were initiated, and they were Masons and Templars. But, remember, what's important here is this bloodline, okay? It's ancient. Goes through Jesus, Mary Magdalene, look, this whole thing about the Da Vinci Code, to me, it was like, this grand revelation. Well, the church created their own problem by trying to make Jesus divine. And I hate to piss people off, I'm sorry, but he was a dude just like you and me, okay? Hate to break it to you, but he was. That's all made up. And I mean, he never claimed to be the Son of God. No, somebody else said that, and it was BS, okay? He's part of this bloodline. And by the way, so was his wife, Mary Magdalene. And yes, they were married. And if you read my book, you'll see all the signs, symbols, and tokens that can tell you how to read Renaissance art. The whole story is preserved there, and it's been preserved.
Which book? You've written 10.
Pardon?
Which book? You've written 10.
Cryptic Code.
Cryptic Code. Okay, great.
Yeah, the latest one. I reveal some pretty heavy stuff in that book, but it's time. But anyway, so this is a bloodline thing, right? And you know, the Essene, which was the sect of people that embraced this ideology that Jesus and Mary were part of, and John the Baptist, and they had a very unique burial practice, where upon the death of a family member, only the family could process the body of the deceased. So what they would do is they would go to the family crypt, which was basically made up of 2 rooms. One was a squared room that had benches on it and tunnels, and then a doorway that was cut into the antechamber, the entrance, if you will, that was open to the southern sky. So it's like you're inside of a cave, the light comes in, but then you go into the burial chamber. So these rituals were performed inside the antechamber. And what they would do is anoint the body with perfumes and oils, and then they would wrap the body in a shroud and then carry it into the burial chamber and put it on one of these benches that was cut into the rock above these tunnels, right? They would leave the body in there for 1 to 2 years. Then they would come back and collect the bones, and they would then put them inside of a box called an ossuary. It's a stone box that has particular dimensions, that was only big enough so that the 2 largest body or bones in the body, the femurs, would fit inside crossed, and then the skull would go in last, and now you know the origin of the skull and crossbones. It's a symbol of Jesus. It's a symbol of the royal family. It's a symbol of the Essene. It's a symbol of mortality. It's a symbol to remind you, you know, that this is where you're going to be someday. So that symbol has been interpreted to be a lot of things, but that's its true origin. And it's a lot older than people think.
Oh, fascinating. I had no idea about that. So thank you for that information. And are the measurements 5:15? Is 5:15 in the measurements of that box? Do you know?
No, typically they're 2 to 1 ratio.
Okay.
Our lodges are 2 to 1. The runestone, 2 to 1 dimensions. Funny, must be another coincidence, right? I mean, there are so many levels of symbolism embedded within the runestone. It's ridiculous. But unless you know what you're looking for, no, you won't see it. Nobody saw it because nobody asked somebody who was initiated. They left it to the scholars who already know everything, right?
Oh, the scholars are, yeah, clearly they know
They're-
what they're talking about.
They're friggin' beauties, aren't they?
Oh man, I'm trying not to, I got to keep a straight face here. So look, I've studied the Sumerian king list, and I've studied the ancient Sumerian tablets and the Babylonian stuff in depth. And there's a lot of connections with the Sumerian stuff and the Egyptian stuff. Inanna, holy Inanna, the queen of heaven, Isis.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad you brought up the guardian, or the Holy Spirit being the feminine aspect that's been hidden. And it seems like the Vatican has done a wonderful job trying to suppress the feminine.
Really?
I don't understand it.
Did they do that? Really?
But it's because they love us so much, folks, clearly.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you know who it was? I mean, you know who is one of the major funders of the Smithsonian Institution?
It isn't the Vatican, is it?
Yes, it is.
No.
And guess what? They've been hiding stuff, haven't they?
Like giants?
Like pretty much everything.
Elongated. When I say giants, I'm talking 9-10 footers. I'm not.
I know what you mean. And, you know, I can't speak to that because I haven't seen them. Am I open to it? Of course I am, but I still need to see the data. But look, there's no doubt that the Vatican has been hiding things. And it seems to be religious fanaticism that causes the world's problems. And it doesn't matter what religion it is, whether it's the radicals, radical Muslims, radical Christians, radical Jews, radical Buddhists. I mean, I don't know how many radical Buddhists I've run into, but it's the extremism. And we're seeing it today, right? we're having, I mean, personally, I'm offended by the fact that a bunch of old white guys are trying to tell women what to do with their bodies. I mean, again, I'm not trying to pick on a particular party, but just that in its face is stupid, right? It's like, and what are they doing? They are sticking with Christian dogma, and they're trying to say that that's what is our country needs. No, it's not what our country needs. That's not what our country was founded on. And by the way, if you believe that, good for you. I'm not going to criticize you, but don't criticize me if I don't believe it. And don't try to claim some sanctimonious religious high ground that, well, my religion says that I'm right. Screw that, That's and that goes to the core of why people make stuff up about us, because they can't control us, because we are told that we can control ourselves by having free thought, free ideas, a free exchange of ideas, and not being told what to think and what to believe and what to do. And that's what organized religion of all faiths, when you get to the extreme, does. And that is what the Freemasons fought against. That is why you have people making stuff up. It's obvious who it is, and people that support those, what I would call radical extremes. That's the truth.
Well, now let's talk. Now I think we should talk about Pike, Albert Pike.
Okay.
I'm fascinated with the book Morals and Dogma, and I haven't read this whole thing yet, but I've gone through it. And
you know what? I've read about 4/5 of it, and I got to the point where it's like eating too much candy. I mean, Brother Pike writes so flowery, and it's beautiful writing. It's absolutely beautiful. But after a while, I'm like, brother, get to the point. It's like. But it's not a criticism. He's amazing, but it's like too much sugar,
Yeah, you can have too much sugar for sure, but don't want to go with the aspartame. That's even worse. Now, so here's where I want to talk about Pike. He's very fascinating, and there's a lot of information and disinformation about Albert Pike. And first, here's the coincidence that I had with him. 12 years ago, I was working in downtown San Antonio. I took a walk during my lunch break, and I walked past the Albert Pike lodge out there. There's an Albert Pike Lodge, and it was fascinating. And then I walked back and that was like half an hour away from my work. So I had an extra long lunch, and I get back. And then I think it was the next day that Albert Pike was all over the news, and he was all over the conspiratorial news. Like, Albert Pike wrote about the 3 world wars, and he had direct contact with Lucifer, and he started the KKK. And so, first of all, the thing with Lucifer is I've been doing a lot more research into Lucifer, and I think that Lucifer is a woman, and I think a feminine aspect. I think that Lucifer is connected with Venus. That's the Eastern star.
All right, now you're going to get the lecture, okay? Hold that thought. I'm going to give you a quick little quiz, all right?
All right.
Don't feel bad, because everybody doesn't know this, okay? Do you know the origin of the 5-pointed star? Just
yeah. That's the orbit of Lucifer, or that's the orbit of Venus.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Do you know how many people know that?
Not many.
Almost nobody. And here's the thing. It is it's not a question. It's a fact. It is the most iconic symbol of our nation, right? How many of those legislators, congressmen and women and senators and our fabulous president, do you think any of them understand this?
Probably not.
Probably not. Do you think that Jerry Jones realizes that his team should probably be called the Dallas Goddesses? They got a 5-pointed star on their helmet, right? And here's what it all boils down to, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. You're right. For thousands, tens of thousands of years, cultures all around the world have been tracking the 3rd brightest heavenly body in the sky, the planet Venus. She appears as a morning star and as an evening star, right? So as we view her movements astronomically from the planet Earth over 8 Earth years, 8. Where's that number? There it is. It makes the 5-pointed star. So that's where the 8 comes in, right? Now, there's more. So if you look at a 5-pointed star, when you look at it, just draw one on a piece of paper real quick. Just do it. Just draw it. How am I doing, everybody? There you go. Nice. So just draw one. Okay. Beautiful. That's a really good one. All right. Now look in the middle. What is in the middle?
A pentagram?
A pentagon.
Pentagon.
Pentagon. All right.
1, 2, 3, 5 points.
Now, if you take the distance of any one of those sides of the pentagon on the inside, okay, and assign it a value of 1. Just put a 1 next to any one of those inner lines, okay? The outer lines, the 10 outer lines that make the 5 points, any one of those lines, the distance, if that's a value of 1, is 1.62 something, 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 something. That ratio of the inner line to the outer line is called the golden ratio, or the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, golden ratio. Wow.
Okay? Now, what is the most iconic symbol of the golden ratio? It's a spiral.
Yeah.
Growth of a spiral is the golden ratio. It's symbolized by that. Now, when you see that symbol in Native American art or anywhere, that is a person that's initiated, that understands what I just told you. And that is the sacred feminine. That is the goddess, okay? Now, let's just do some math for a second, okay? The golden ratio, when it's rounded to whole numbers, what you do is you take the first 2 numbers, you add them together, you get a sum, okay? Do this on the sheet. I don't do it yet, but I'll tell you what to do. Then what you do is you take the sum and you add it to the highest previous number that you just added, and then you get your sum and you keep going. Okay, so here we go. 1 plus 1 is what?
2.
2 times 1 is?
2.
Excuse me.
2.
Plus
2 plus 3.
1 is 3,
right?
Okay, 3 plus what? What's the next one?
4.
No. You add the sum.
Oh, 3 plus 2, so I get 5.
5. 5 plus?
3 is 8. Then 13.
8 plus?
21.
Okay, you got it.
Okay. Yeah.
What are those sacred numbers?
Sacred
5,
numbers.
8,
Sweet.
3, and so on. Now, what number did we grow up with, at least I grew up with, that was considered a bad, unlucky number?
13.
Why?
Because that's when they were a certain group was slaughtered Friday the 13th, and then it's kind of been.
Why is it unlucky?
Well, they want you to think it's unlucky because it's like the feminine.
Boom. Exactly. Because that was the essence of their ideology. Now, it might be a coincidence, probably not, that many people don't know this, that the Knights Templar Order was originally officially founded when a papal bull was signed in Troyes, France, when Saint Bernard de Clairvaux, who was the leader of the Cistercians, who wrote the charter for the Knights Templar Order and was also a member of these bloodline families. That charter was signed on January 13 of 1129. 13. Must be another coincidence, right? Well, the church, who has been demonizing who?
Yeah, right. No,
the feminine, right?
Right.
When they put down the order, they figured out what they were really doing, right? They were venerating the goddess. Mother Mary wasn't Mother Mary, the Virgin. They knew better than that, right? They venerated her as the goddess Isis that they'd been venerating for thousands of years already. The church figured it out, and they made a point to demonize that number by putting them down on that day, and it became bad luck. And boy, you better not venerate the number 13 because it's the number of the feminine. Here's another thing. How many synodic cycles of the moon there are every year?
13.
13. Oh, and it corresponds with what? Women's menstrual cycles every 28 days, 13 of them in a year. Huh, funny. So now we have the moon goddess, right? You've got Venus as the goddess in the heavens, the physical manifestation of the goddess, and there's something called the triple spiral, the triple goddess. And what's the third one? Mother Earth. So once you understand the signs, symbols, and tokens, you come to realize pretty quickly that the initiated ones venerate the feminine, the goddess, the creator, the true creator, that obviously we play a role in that. But now I think you're starting to understand what's really going on.
And I think you just answered a question for me. Recently, I had a guest on the show that has uncovered all sorts of these elongated skulls. His name's L.A. Marzulli. And I think L.A. is a great guy. I don't have the same religious beliefs as him. And that, that's okay. I think it's good to have different opinions. Iron sharpens iron. It makes people stronger. So, but he brought up these civilizations, these ancient civilizations that are based upon a lunar cycle of 18.6 years. And I was asking the question, okay, so why are these civilizations built upon an 18.6 year cycle? Why wouldn't they just build them upon a sun cycle? Because you could track the seasons with the sun and you wouldn't need to do it over an 18.6 year period of time. I think you just explained it. The feminine aspect of the divine. The moon is a feminine aspect of the divine, is it not?
Absolutely, 100%.
Wow. So cool.
Well, it is cool. And now when you look at we're initiating you right now into some of this stuff. I mean, the fraction of the people and I'll tell you what, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking to you about right now, most Freemasons don't know. They don't teach that to us. And what's beautiful about Freemasonry, and this is a really important thing that I want to say, and that is, once you go through and you become a master mason, you go through your 3 degrees, and they are profound and wonderful. And some of my favorite degrees I've ever been through were those first 3 degrees. Once you go through them, you're on the squad, you're a fully vested Freemason, and you don't have to do another thing in your life if you want, except attend lodge and do good work, right? Try to make the world a better place. But if you are so inclined and you want to seek additional light is a code word for knowledge, right? You can go through the Scottish Rite, which I've done, all 32 degrees, or you can go the York Rite, which I have also done, and I have been knighted as a Sir Knight. It was in one of those degrees that I made that discovery that connected with the runestone. And there are other opportunities, right? But the point is, you might get a little encouragement from guys that are already Scottish Rite once you become a Master Mason. Say, hey, you might want to look into the Scottish Rite, right? But there's no pressure to do it. It's up to you. And that's really the lesson at the end of the day that I think probably more than anything about Freemasonry that I love is you can take it as far as you want to go. And you can take it a long ways. But it's your choice, right? If you want to learn about Gnosticism, you want to learn about Buddhism, you want to learn about whatever. I'm a history guy, I'm a research guy, right? And there are all kinds of avenues, but nobody's pushing you. It's up to you. And that's kind of how it is in life, right? You can just sit around and go to your job and drink beer every day after work and just live your life. Fine. But I think for me, there's a lot more out there. I want to learn more about how the world works. And to me, I like to drink beer too, but I also want to learn and I want to understand what's going on out there. And knowledge is power, right? And so that's the wonderful thing. And believe me, we have resources within the craft for learning nobody else has. And it's amazing. The nice thing too, I will say, is the brotherhood has embraced my wife, Janet. Now, she cannot become a Mason. If there's anything about Freemasonry that I might have an issue with, it's that. But I also understand the tradition and why that is. But I will tell you that when I go to, like, Thursday night is what we call Rite Night, Scottish Rite Night. I'm in a few of the degrees now. I'm part of those performances, right? To educate new brothers going through. But what we do is we go there early and we have dinner. We sit around and talk. And she sits right next to me. Sometimes she's the only woman there, and they treat her like gold. They love her. And that's really means a lot to me, and to her, because especially the white hats, they get the feminine thing. Not all the brothers do, but that's okay. It comes when it comes, if it comes.
Isn't there something similar for women, like the Eastern Stars or something?
Eastern Star, yeah, but it's not. It's they have their own degrees. And to be quite frank, I have not participated. I've spoken to the Eastern Star, their groups. I've spoken to Demolays and some of the other affiliated bodies, but I have never seen their degrees. But I would like to. I bet they're pretty interesting, and I probably could if I pursued it. We're not doing degrees right now, or actually we're just now starting back up again. But yeah, and believe me, they treat women with respect, but it's not. They can't fully participate in their degrees. And I'll be honest with you, we're not doing anything that the women can't handle. But it's like, sometimes women want to get together and talk about their stuff, and we want to get together and talk about our stuff. And, it's a different dynamic, let's face it, But, and Janet can't watch the degrees, but she can go in the library. They welcome her. She does her own research. It's really a nice vibe. I really like it.
That's cool. Now you were talking about Albert Pike, and I wanted to jump back for a minute because there was a letter that is a very famous letter by Albert Pike that supposedly described 3 world wars. Now, I've done a lot of digging in this, and 2 of them, yes. The third one is iffy when he starts talking about the Third World War. I think that information actually came later. There's actually something from a 1958 book that has almost per verbatim the Third World War that he describes. But are you familiar with the letter that I'm talking about?
No, I'm not.
Here, let me do a quick screen share with you, and I want to get your take on this. This is the Albert Pike to Mazzini, August 15, 1871, 3 World Wars, ? And this goes on to talk about how Albert Pike wrote a letter describing 3 world wars that would take place. And the First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Then it goes on to say, students of history will recognize the political alliances of England on one side and Germany on the other, forged between 1871 and 1898 by Otto von Bismarck, co-conspirator of Albert Pike, were instrumental in bringing about the First World War. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Now, this is where it gets interesting because it talks about the Third World War, and it talks about how the differences caused by the Illuminati between the Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point completely physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. Anyway, if you read this whole thing, it's like, wow, how did he know that? But nobody's confirmed that he wrote this third part right here. They were able to link this back to a letter from like 1890. or the 1870s even, which is quite interesting. But I think somebody like you, with your research and your knowledge, and being a forensic geologist, you could probably find out where this originated. And so, what do you think about that? What's your take on Albert Pike? Did he not like these global religions because of their power, or is that?
Well, I think, the global religions, the problem with them, like I said, is extremism. And you get people that get put in a position of power and they get drunk with it. I mean, we're watching it right now, right? And, what happens is the problems of the human condition enter in. Narcissism and, this need for validation and praise and look at me, it's all about me. And I'm not just talking about Trump. I mean, but anybody that can't see that is just blind, right? And the issues that I have as a Freemason with all of that, and he's a perfect microcosm of this whole problem. He anything that happens in a democratic state is the Democrats' fault, right? And he only focuses on the people that he thinks support him at the detriment of others, right? And so we have this division that's going on, and this is what religion does, right? It does the same thing. You're either with us or you're not. And if you're not, then you're bad. And so what happens is it gives you, it's an age-old problem that humanity has had. When people don't agree, it becomes easy to label them something, right? So to justify persecution. The natives were savages. I mean, they're beneath us, right? And so it's okay for us to kill them and take their land. It's okay because God says that they're pagans, they're not worthy, right? So it's okay, right? And this justification in the name of religion is been going on forever. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong, right? And we've talked about the reasons because you look at, I will say this, I'm particularly offended by the way the indigenous people have been treated because I've spent a lot of time with many of them at a very high level. And I'll tell you this right now, there is no culture on the planet that I know of that lives in balance with its surroundings better than they do. I mean, nobody does, right? To them, they don't own property. They don't own land, right? They have territories that they defend, but it's not theirs, right? And, they honor and respect and venerate the women. And within the societies, one of the secrets that they pass is the use of medicinal plants and how to use nature to have a better life. I mean, when the Europeans came over and the pilgrims and all that BS, the reason they survived was because they had plants to heal them, right? I mean, they didn't have heart disease and cancer and all that stuff. They didn't have that here. And it makes you wonder, well, why is that? Well, because they lived a healthy lifestyle and they respected their surroundings. Every time they took the life of an animal, in some cases, they would take the last breath of that animal because they respected it, because this is a gift of nature and you are giving up your life to help sustain us. I mean, do we think about that when we slaughter them in the slaughterhouses? Hell no. So to see these people demonized and just killed because the people that killed them were told that they were subhuman in some way. And in fact, the opposite was true, for you to demonize. And this has been going on forever, right? Hey, did you see the story here? What do you got?
As you're saying this, I felt compelled to show this because I've got a friend that is native. He's a Navajo. And it's so funny that I just texted him today and we're going to get together this weekend. He painted this for me. And,
wow.
and one of the things that you said that I thought was so remarkable is the way that they respect nature. Is that's so valuable because we are a part of nature also.
Oh, really?
Right? We're in nature. We're not working against it. We're not out of it. We're in it.
Know that by the way we treat the planet today, and we're just tearing apart all these safeguards for what? And again, you know what? I guess I'll just say it. I mean, right now, the current leadership, not just the one guy, but all of his supporters, they're tearing apart all these environmental safeguards for what reason? So they can make more effing money. Well, what good is money if you live in a shithole, right? I mean, to me, it's just like, really? I mean, and there's no regard. And this is one of the things that I was taught, not in Freemasonry, but in the Midday Wind Sweat, within their degrees, is that this planet is a gift. You're part of something that's obviously bigger than yourselves, and your mission on this planet is to try to leave it better than you found it. Think about your kids, your grandkids, and the ones you'll never meet. Is that what they're doing, the current leadership? What the hell? It's like, no. And we are at a very critical time in our history. And I think this goes back to these letters that you're talking about with Pike. He understood this. And I think there's a lot of people that could see that we're getting to a very critical point. Now, we're getting a little bit into this woo-woo area, but it's not woo-woo. It's actually science. And I'll tell you why. Have you ever heard of precession?
Yes.
Precession of the equinoxes? Okay, well, basically it's an astronomical phenomena that has to do with the zodiacal belt and keeping track of what we call the primary constellation of the zodiac that appears on the eastern horizon at sunrise on the spring equinox. And this is something the ancients have been keeping track of all the time. And whatever that primary constellation of the zodiac is that the sun rises through on that day, that's considered a sacred time. Now, that doesn't last forever because of the Earth's wobble. It causes the Earth to move slowly. We perceive it as the stars moving. And so what happens is that constellation that's in the eastern sky on the spring equinox slowly descends. And then the next one cycles in, and that becomes the new age, right? Now, it takes 26,000 years for this cycle to complete. We started with, say, Leo. It takes 26,000 years for Leo to come back. But actually, the breaker is Aquarius. Now, the history of humanity is tied to this. And I'll tell you about it. You know Akhenaten and King Tut,
Oh, yeah.
and the crook and the flail? Okay, well, the flail herds the bulls, the followers of Taurus, the old religion in Egypt, right? And the crook herds the rams, the sheep of Aries, the new religion of Aries the ram, right? When he came into power, all these archaeologists and historians are going, well, he was the heretic pharaoh. Why was he a heretic? Because he tried to change the religion from polytheistic dualism, the old religion of the age of Taurus the bull, to monotheistic dualism, the new age of Aries the ram, right? And it's symbolized on his chest with the crook and the flail representing the transition. And it was his attempt to try to unite the two religions under the new religion, and it failed. And his people were driven out. They were called the Aryans, the followers of Aries, okay? And they eventually ended up in what is now we call the Holy Land, right? The final leader, the final pharaoh, the final grand master of the age of Aries the ram was a guy we now know as John the Baptist, who's typically depicted wearing a wool shawl, often carrying a shepherd's crook, or a lamb in his arm, or a lamb in his feet. Now you know why. That's why. Because he was the last grand master of the age of Aries the ram. And he initiates who?
Jesus.
Who was born of the Lamb of God. What does that mean? What it means is Jesus was born in the last 4 years of Aries the ram. And he becomes what? The fisher king. Pisces, the age of Pisces, the fish, is the next age after Aries. So the transition from Aries to Pisces was John the Baptist and Jesus, which tells you what? The reason that Jesus is so important isn't necessarily who he was, as when he was. You with me?
Absolutely.
So if you're a follower of Jesus, you're a follower of the fish, right? Now, how long has it been?
About 2,000 years.
About 2,000 years. So the average age of one of the 12 primary constellations of the zodiac
2,000 years.
160 years, but it's not evenly broken up. It depends on the size of the constellation and when it disappears and the new one arrives. Taurus was a big constellation. It lasted about 2,700 years. Aries is very small. It only lasted about 1,400 years. Pisces is kind of average. It lasted 2,000 years. So guess what? Do you remember 2012?
Aquarius.
End, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be bad. No, it was simply the end of the age of Pisces, the fish. But there's more than that. It wasn't just the age of the latest year, great year. It was the end of the 26,000 year long cycle. In 2012, now that's the Mayan calendar, okay? That's when they knew. That's what that's all about. What happens when one cycle ends?
A new one begins.
Guess what? A new cycle is now just beginning, right? And according to the prophecies of these ages, which if you look back historically, you would be shocked at how accurate these things are. I was on a show called The Last Pope a couple years ago, and I was interviewed, and this is what I talked about, because the whole premise was in 2012, a monk in the 12th century predicted in 2012 that the current pope would resign. That happened. The new pope would be from the new world, not the old world. That happened. Brother Francis is from Argentina, the new world, right? And he would be the last pope. Now, how the hell can some monk in the 12th century know what's going to happen almost 1,000 years later?
Astronomy.
Boom. Exactly. Now, Brother Malachi, this monk I'm talking about, made a pilgrimage. He founded the first Cistercian abbey in Ireland. It's called Mellifont. I've been there. And he made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. But on the way, he wanted to stop at the Mother Abbey in Clairvaux to meet Bernard, the same guy who wrote the charter for the Knights Templar. Once he stopped there, he said, when I die, I want to be buried here. And they became very close friends. He was the one that wrote down all these prophecies, right? And so now we have a better understanding that how could a pope, and that was what they wanted me to explain on the show. But they didn't use anything I said because they wanted to make it all gloom and doom. And, anyway. So now you're
say it could be aliens, possibly. I want you to say that. That's your next line.
So anyway, getting to where we are now, I think you get the point, right? The symbol of Aquarius, which of course is what? The feminine water bearer, the bringer of life, right? It's the symbol is two streams flowing together as one, right? It's a time of unity. But the prophecy says we're supposed to go through a time of great upheaval. And it's a very dangerous time. This is what the prophecies have said for 1,000 years. And that it's going to be very tenuous in the beginning of this new cycle. And we're either going to figure it out and we're going to move on fine into the future, or we're not. We are in that time right now. It's amazing to me because I've been telling this same thing for about 15 years now. And all of a sudden, it's happening. It's unbelievable. Now, precession is everything. If you go back and you look at the Sphinx, it faces which direction?
West? East?
Due east. Why? Because it's looking at itself. And this is how you date the pyramids and how you date the Sphinx. Because about 12,000 years ago, guess what the primary constellation of the zodiac was back then? Leo, the lion. Now, today, the Sphinx has got a pharaoh's head. That was carved about 5,000 years ago. And it's a tiny little head on a big lion of a body. You know why? Because the original head was what?
A lion.
Boom. So this is the key to the whole history of humanity. I just gave it to you. And, you know, Akhenaten wasn't a heretic. He was doing his job because he was initiated. He got it. And I can tell you this, everything about Freemasonry, everything about our world, everything about the natives, it all goes back to the heavens. As above, so below, and so forth. So all this stuff, all these mysteries that we're talking about, it all goes back to there, including, as I have learned recently, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Serious? I'm not being serious, but I'm from Sirius.
I hear you, man.
Very cool. Oh, dude, you blew my mind. I mean, this was amazing. And
does it make sense?
100%. And what's so cool about it's like a matrix, because things that we're talking about, I have been also discussing, and I almost feel like the vibrational energy that we're picking up on, you know, we're tapping into similar energies, because very incredible connections there. And I love how you brought up your life path and how you got into Freemasonry. I think that's really cool. And another thing I wanted to bring up before we finish up also is the New Hampshire. You were recently at the New Hampshire Stonehenge, correct?
Oh yeah, I was there about a month ago. We filmed some scenes for a different show.
So this must have been why our interview was delayed by a higher power, because just recently, that interview I did with LA, they connected he had an interview with somebody describing how they took a straight line from the New Hampshire Stonehenge to a specific.
That was in our show. That was in our show.
That was your show.
That was
you.
Show.
He was referencing you.
Kelsey Stone. Yeah. Basically, what he did was one of the alignments, the solstice alignment. If you track it all the way back, it goes to Stonehenge in England. And then if you go back even farther, it goes to another older Stonehenge in Lebanon, which is where the Phoenicians had their home base, right? And they were the ones that were coming over here getting the copper and then stop in England to get the tin for the Bronze Age.
Dude, you are a stud, man. Thank you so much for being a guest on Leak Project. I would love a follow-up sometime if possible.
Sure. You know, we never got to Brother Pike, but I tell you what, I'll save this for the next time.
Could you do it now real quick, or do you want to save it for next time? It's up to you, because we've been going on for almost 2 hours, but I mean, whatever you want to do.
Well, I'll just finish with this, okay?
Okay.
And you know, you wanted to know a little bit about Brother Pike. Brother Pike was a lawyer. A lot of people don't realize this, but he represented the Western First Nations tribe as their lawyer to make sure that our government would honor the treaties that we made with them. The reason Pike died with no money was because he never got paid, because they never honored those agreements and paid the natives. He was supposed to get 12%. But anyway, I digress. And actually later in life, he never said anything to anybody about why he had no money. The Scottish Rite realized what the situation was, and they gave him a pension of $1,200 a year for the rest of his life. But he was a very honorable guy. He did fight for the Confederacy, and then after the Confederacy, this is something a lot of people don't know. You know, they lost, right? So they were vulnerable. So there were raiding parties that came from the north that would come down into the southern states and try to steal their land, raid their properties. And, you know, I mean, so what happened is he was part of groups that formed militias of people who were protecting their homes, their businesses, their farms, their land. And that was called the Ku Klux Klan. It was later on that it morphed into a different thing that was supporting slavery and everything else. But he was not part of that. So a lot of people think that he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He was, but it wasn't what they thought it was. It was before it became, what we all recognize it as this racist institution. And so people that venerate Pike, thinking that he was the organizer of the Ku Klux Klan, well, yeah, he was one of those guys, but he was not one of those guys. Anyway, I digress. You didn't know that, did you?
No, and thank you for telling me that, because I've had people leave comments in the videos. I mean, we've got over 350,000 subscribers, and most people are are we getting audio interference, or is it okay?
A little bit, but now you're back.
Okay. So people have asked that question. Was he a part of the Ku Klux Klan? And they thought, oh, how could you talk about him, Rex? He started the Ku Klux Klan. And with all the research that I did on Mr. Pike, he was not racist. He was helping out the natives. But you just connected the conspiracy. Thank you. That's the answer.
Where it came from. It's, what, most of these conspiracy theories, when people aren't trying to intentionally deceive with bullshit, okay? Because they do that. A lot of people do that.
All the time.
In fairness to a lot of people, they're just misinformed. They don't have all the information. And, sometimes it's their own fault for not digging deep enough. Sometimes people have agendas and they just conveniently leave out facts. Gee, where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, every freaking day. Anyway, but okay, so one more thing. After the Civil War, they lost. He was a Confederate general, right? He was fighting for what he thought was right, the way of life that he thought was right. I'm not going to defend it. I'm just saying in context, he was fighting for the cause that he believed in. Now, after the war, there were people from the North that also wanted to hang him. So he was basically an outlaw. And what happened was he escaped to Canada. And he lived with the then contemporary Masonically, a guy by the name of Grand Master W.J.B. MacLeod Moore. MacLeod Moore was the Grand Master for the Knights Templar order in Canada. Pike was in the United States, so they knew each other. They would meet. And so when he was in trouble, he fled up there, and MacLeod Moore gave him sanctuary. We call it sanctuary, and protected him. Well, during that time, Albert Pike wrote a letter asking for a pardon from then President Andrew Johnson, the one who was impeached, the first president ever to be impeached. It was political, of course, just like Trump's impeachment. Anyway, he asked for a pardon and he got it. So eventually he came back to the United States. The problem was, because of the post-Civil War era, he was frowned upon, right? He was a Confederate general. So he pretty much stayed at home. And it was during that time that he wrote that book, Morals and Dogma. Now, our Scottish Rite degrees, a lot of them came from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. A lot of the information that he used, he got from W.J.B. MacLeod Moore, the Grand Master of the Templars up there in Canada, who was free to travel and did, and went to Europe, the Scandinavian countries, into the Mediterranean region for Masonic events, right? And learned about other degrees in other parts of the world. That information, he came back, and he and Pike corresponded for decades. And in a lot of those letters, Moore was sharing different rituals from different countries, and he incorporated those into Morals and Dogma and our degrees, right? And that's what a lot of correspondence was. Now, several years ago, the guy who was the current Grand Master of Knights Templar for all of Canada is a guy by the name of Bill Mann, William Mann. William Mann has been a friend of ours for probably 15 years. We're Masonic brothers. We're both Sir Knights and Scottish Rite Masons and everything else. But Bill is also half Native. Guess who introduced me to the Medewin? Him. That's the secret society of the natives. But I digress. On his journey to becoming Grand Master, at one point he was the Grand Archivist, the Grand Historian. He was in charge of all the Templar documents in Canada. And when he first got into that position, the guy, one of the brothers said to him, the guy that he was taking over for, who was an older guy, like 90 years old, he said, you may want to talk to the brother because he didn't turn everything over. He's got something under his bed. Now, he wasn't trying to keep it for himself. He was just protecting it, right? So Bill went to him and he said, brother, you need to hand this over. And he did. Well, that briefcase belonged to W.J.B. McLeod Moore. And in that briefcase were 27 letters written by Albert Pike to W.J.B. McLeod Moore that the world had never seen. They still haven't seen them, but I have. This is one of those letters, okay? Now, one more thing you need to understand is, remember I talked about the Enochian story on the runestone, the 9 arches, the secret vault?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Bill was told by the Medewin is that the Templars also brought treasure west and hid it in a secret vault in Montana. And there's a lot more to come on that. Stay tuned. They're still guarding it to this day. Now, you'll read this in the cryptic code, but do you remember you probably heard of Lewis and Clark?
Oh, yeah.
Probably heard of the Louisiana Purchase?
Yep.
Probably heard about Thomas Jefferson, who was the American ambassador in France for 5 years.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he was. And he attended the Lodge of Nine Sisters in France. He was a brother, too. Most people don't know that. Somebody whispered in his ear a little something about something over in North America, a secret vault. And then not long after that, he made this grand purchase and immediately sent a couple of guys to go check on it, right? You never heard this story before, have you?
No.
Guess what the main point of that mission was? To check on the crown jewel of the Louisiana Purchase that nobody to this day still knows about. Because in July of 1806, Lewis and Clark separated. Did you know that?
No.
Look it up. William Clark was not a Mason. Meriwether was. You can also look this up, Google it. There was secret communication between Thomas Jefferson and Meriwether Lewis using a Masonic box code with the key phrase artichokes. Look it up. You'll find it. What were they secretly communicating about that nobody else could hear? And why did he separate with 9 other Masons and go up the Little Big Fork River and cross the Continental Divide? According to the natives, less than a day's ride from the secret vault, and then reconnected with Clark 6 weeks later. And then they made it back. I'll tell you why. Because he was checking on the secret vault to make sure that it was safe. And then when he went to go report to Thomas Jefferson on the way there, he committed suicide at Natchez Trace. Bullshit. He was murdered.
They wanted the coordinates. And wow.
So it probably had something to do with that.
Yeah, like they're like, okay, where's it at? And he didn't say anything, so they just wow.
Oh, I never mind. I'm giving you context so this letter makes sense. Okay? So now this letter was written May 21st, 1881. And everything that I've told you about prepares you for this letter. Okay? Now, and I want you to know that this letter is not my discovery. This is Bill Mann's discovery. But he has published a novel in April of this year, and this letter is in it. That's why I can now share this. most illustrious brother and fellow Sir Knight, W.J.B. MacLeod Moore, 33rd degree, Knights Templar. My most illustrious brother, oddly enough, I find myself traveling to the west, into the wilderness, in search of that which I have shared with you. What is he talking about?
I don't know. Treasure?
The secret vault. Right? Now you know. It is the evening of the 21st, and I find the sun still high in the sky, suggesting that somewhere an ancient lodge is conducting its ritual upon the square, 3 times 7. That's a little bit of his flowery talk. Tomorrow I will be meeting with the remaining chiefs of the Western First Nations. They remind me a great deal of the lost tribes of Israel, seeking a new Jerusalem, so noble yet so desperate, wandering aimlessly across the desert. Or were they? No, of course not. Brigham Young understood this and ventured forth to the prime meridian, seeking the same as you and I. What's he looking for? The secret vault.
Did he say Brigham Young?
Brigham Young. There's more to this story, dude.
The Mormon.
The Mormon.
Oh, he had a lot of Freemasonry symbols with Mormonism. Like, even,
Do you think?
hello,
They stole it. They stole it.
the Beehive State.
Many organizations have modeled themselves after Freemasonry, but that's just another one. It's anyway. For all of our virtues, it is most fortunate that he, Brigham Young, did not fully understand the signs, symbols, and tokens left behind by our fellow Knights Templar who covenanted the goddess. This is Pike. He knew. Well, of course he knew. So did all of our founding fathers before him, right? About the Templars who covenanted the goddess. By the way, the goddess. By the way, when they came over here, they stayed in the 14th century and intermarried with the native women. They intentionally put the bloodline into the natives to protect it. And what did the church do? Slaughtered them all. That's one of the reasons they did that. But I digress. Anyway, you never heard that before, did you?
No.
It's time the truth came out, dude.
Yes, it is.
This would have been a great episode, but I'm not doing it with them. Now, let's continue. I find that I must remind myself constantly of our temperate ways as we are constantly surrounded by temptation. It will help my pain to share the ceremonies and degrees of our Medewin brothers who share the blood of our ancestors. Do you think it's a coincidence that in the winter of 1803, 1804, Lewis and Clark stayed with the Mandan?
No.
The blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indians? Read my book, Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers, and you'll read about George Catlin, who talked about the 29 direct parallels between the Okipa ceremony of the Mandan and the Moses Exodus story of the Israelites. He was with them from 1834 to 1835, 2 years. And then funny, 2 years later, our military gave the Mandan smallpox-infected blankets and they were wiped out. Coincidence, I'm sure. Anyway, let me keep going. Oh, and who did they connect with, Lewis and Clark, that winter? Some young girl named Sacagawea, we say Sacagawea, who had been kidnapped by the Mandan from the Arikara, and they took her and her husband and her child that she had on the journey back to the Shoshone. Her brother was the chief of the Shoshone, and Lewis greeted him with the Masonic greeting and the red, white, and blue proper colors because the Templars told them they better bring the proper colors and the proper signs, symbols, and tokens, the red and white stripes and the 5-pointed star. And why did they want to meet with the chief of the Shoshone? Because they were the horse people. That's how they completed the journey. Without the horses, they never would have made it or without her, who taught them how to eat bitter roots to survive the next winter, right? So you didn't hear any of this, did you?
No, and I did hear, though, that there's something similar to the Ten Commandments in stone that the natives wrote in Arizona. And I found something in Utah that reminds me of like an Exodus story of a bunch of petroglyphs.
Look, they know the story. They've known it the whole time because they dealt with the Hebrews, the Essene, when they came over here in the 1st century. So anyway, by the way, this is a little rumor. Sacagawea, her ancestor was a Templar. She's a bloodline descendant. It's not a coincidence that they connected with her. And there's more to that story too. But anyway, let me keep going. It is in their lodges that I find myself most humbled and modest toward the grand architect of the universe. That was the first thing I told you about, and here it is in his own words. You need to be humble before you can truly receive this knowledge. Now he says a few flowery things. I want to assure you that it has never been my intention to impugn his wisdom, nor set up my own imperfect sense of right against his providence and dispensations, nor attempt too rashly to explore the mysteries of God's infinite essence and inscrutable plans, and of that great nature, capitalized, which we are not made capable to understand. Forever, I will steer far away from those vain philosophies. Albert Pike, 33rd degree, Knights Templar, Sovereign Grand Commander.
This is a whole new ball game.
He just confirmed all of my research. And you know what? If somebody's going to know, he's going to know. By the way, his ancestry, he goes back to all the 3 of the 9 knights that went under the temple and the whole thing.
Yeah, he's a very mystical being. Like even those that have heard misinformation about him, they've got he's got a big persona. So did he speak like a dozen or so languages as well? I read something about that.
I don't know that for sure, but look, the guy was brilliant. He was brilliant, and he was well connected. And even when he couldn't travel, he got the information. And there's 26 more letters, but this is the one that absolutely we haven't released this to the world in the context that I just gave it to you. But I'll tell you, what are the scholars going to say? You going to tell me about Albert Pike? You might want to rethink that one there, Gunner. You don't know shit about Pike. And I'll tell you who does. A brother in Washington, D.C., Art de Hoyos. And when these letters first came out, I went to Brother de Hoyos and I said, hey, can you help us validate these letters? This is important. Nobody knows more about Pike than him. He's in the Scottish Rite Temple in Washington, D.C. That's where all of Pike's letters are. That's where Pike is right now. But I didn't tell you that. Anyway, Bill sent us photographs of the letters, and I just sent one to Art. He goes like this. He goes, that's Pike. He goes, I'd recognize his handwriting anywhere. And he recognized the station. They're absolutely authentic.
Oh, that's cool. This is fascinating. It's like new information, uncovering history, the knowledge that they tried to suppress. And now it's the age of Aquarius, so they can't hide it anymore.
Well, and part of it is the truth is to be revealed. I was told by a native shaman many years ago, he gave me a Cherokee name. He said it's Wasi Ikwa, which means big Moses, big messenger, or Janet, as Janet says, big mouth. So this is my job, and I'm doing it.
Man, well, you're a professional, and I thank you so much for the opportunity, man. This is really one of those, I've done 3,000 interviews plus in my time. And this is at the top. This is the cream of the creme. You gave the matrix keys, the passion, and connecting all the dots. So thank you very much for this. And
thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And, it really is a gift because we had a beautiful platform with America on Earth. And I've said some disparaging things, and and I basically meant what I said, but I also need to say that I appreciate the opportunities that they gave me. I was always treated very well by the networks that I worked with. You know, I really, you know, I want to thank them for giving me that opportunity. But you know what? We're going to keep bringing the love and bringing the knowledge and the light, and however we can. And we have an opportunity that we're pursuing. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. Click the links in the video description box. Also, make sure to pick up the books here. Now, I'm on Amazon right now, and it's got The Hooked X.
Well, what I would say is, if you want to just buy the book and you don't care, buy it on Amazon. If you want to get a signed copy, because every copy of every book, or if you buy my wife's book, she'll sign it for you. Go to www.hookedx.com. It's spelled HOOKEDX.com. And all the orders come to me, and I sign every book, and I put a little surprise in there too.
I'm showing off the website here, and I want to show off the book. So
awesome.
It's all, you know, if you get an autograph with a book too, it really makes it extra cool, in my opinion. So
yeah, you know, you pay a couple extra bucks, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah. You think Obama is the same DNA line as Akhenaten?
You mean brother Barack?
Is it brother Obama? Oh,
did I say that? Never mind.
You did.
Did not say that. Did I? Oh, maybe I did.
Wow. We'll leave it at that, folks. Halo. All right. Be the change you want to see.